Welcome, friends. This is Gary Schindler. I'm a historian and board member for the Freeborn County Historical Museum and Village Board. And this is episode 6, the final episode in this series, Ghost Towns of Freeborn County. So what I want to do in this last episode is focus on some strange, unusual facts about the county and its settling. Some are tragic, some may be a little humorous, but just some interesting little nuggets about the ghost towns of Freeborn County. So the first place I want to go is just to some of the naming of these communities I find interesting. So let me just give you a couple examples. So here's one, Newry. Newry was a ghost town or a community established in the northeast corner of Freeborn County in 1854, and it was the name for the town came from a Thomas Fitzsimmons, who's one of the first settlers of Newry. He was actually the township clerk, and Newry was named for a seaport and river in Northern Ireland, again reflecting some of the folks that were settling in the county at that time. Another community by the name of Nunda. Nunda was located west of Albert Lea near Twin Lakes. It was established in 1856, and it was named by Patrick Fitzsimmons, who was a native of Ireland and one of the first settlers in Nunda. And he named it Nunda in honor of the towns of the same name in which he had lived in New York and Illinois. The name Nunda is derived from the Indian name of Nundoa, N-U-N-D-A-O, which means hilly, or according to some other individuals, potato ground. So Nunda, Freeborn County. Another ghost town, a small village hamlet that was north of Albert Lea, also in contention for the county seat, as a matter of fact, and its name was Itasca. And Itasca, maybe this makes a lot of sense to you Minnesotans, but Itasca was named after the source of the Mississippi River in northern Minnesota. Another ghost town, Moscow, which is eastern edge, east central Freeborn County. It was settled in 1855, and the name Moscow actually came from one of the residents who there was a small patch of oak trees that caught on fire, and it reminded the residents, this is that knowledge of history that these folks have, it reminded them of the blaze in Moscow at the time of Napoleon's attack into Russia. So that's where the name Moscow came from. It wasn't Russian settlers per se, but a recollection of Russian history with the attack of Napoleon about, I think, 20 years before. We have the ghost town of Bath, and again, that's north central Freeborn County, established in 1856, and its name came from, or it was named after a county seat in Steuben, New York, by one of the native townsmen by the name of Frederick Koken, who settled there, named it after a county seat in New York. Another ghost town, Carlton, which is near the city of Freeborn, I would say northwestern part of Freeborn County, is Carlston, Freeborn County, first settled in 1855, and it was initially named Stanton in honor of Elias Stanton, who was a settler in that area in the 1850s. Mr. Stanton had amputation because he froze his feet in the winter of 1855 or 1858. But the name was changed to honor Theodore Carlston, who was one of the second settlers in Freeborn County. He also drowned in Freeborn Lake. And so to honor him, the name was changed from Stanton, the guy that had his feet amputated, to Carlston after Theodore Carlston. So an odd set of circumstances around Freeborn Lake leading to the name of that ghost town. Another ghost town is Armstrong. You'll find Armstrong in between, kind of the middle between Alden and Albert Lea, south of I-90. And this is a railroad station that was established in 1878. And it was named after a prominent politician in Minnesota. It was named after Thomas Henry Armstrong. He erected a grain elevator in Armstrong, and he was originally from Ohio and came to Minnesota 1855. He moved to Albert Lea in 1874, but again, that community of Armstrong was named after him because he served in the state legislature from 1864 to 1865, was Speaker of the House in 1865, served as Lieutenant Governor from 1866 to 1870, and then as State Senator from 1877 to 1878. So Thomas Armstrong is his name was used to establish that ghost town train station in Freeborn County. Bancroft was the focus of a previous episode of the podcast. The Bancroft is north of Albert Lea, the current location of the Good Samaritan Retirement Center. And George Bancroft had a very notable history. He wrote the History of the United States. That was a very popular history book. But he also founded Annapolis Naval Academy. He was an ambassador to England, and he was also Secretary of the Navy. So the village and ghost town in Freeborn County by the name of Bancroft is named after that gentleman. Now let's conclude episode 6 here with some interesting stories and tales from some ghost towns in Freeborn County. The first one I'd like to tell you about is Freeman, which is southern edge of Freeborn County. In 1855, a German native, his name was John Oldenhaus, arrived in Freeborn County in the Freeman Township. Even though he set foot in the county in late summer of 1855, he was preparing his land for farming, but he had to scramble to erect a structure to live in prior to the onset of winter. Some of our early settlers, by the way, when they first arrived here, lived outside, slept on the ground, maybe built a shack or a shanty to live in temporarily. Some lived in their prairie schooner or wagon until they could get a more substantive house erected. Mr. Oldenhaus, what he did for his first winter here in Freeborn County is he dug a hole in the ground and covered it with poles and straw, and his family lived there for the winter of 1855. After that winter, Mr. Oldenhaus erected a shanty, which is essentially a shack, and continued to improve the land and lived in Freeman Township, or the ghost town of Freeman, for another couple years, and then he finally moved his family to Kansas in 1858. He died shortly after that move of what was characterized as a brain disorder. Another ghost town by the name of Nunda, and Nunda is again a ghost town that would be near Twin Lakes, but a very fascinating story here of Nunda. In 1859, Henry Kriegler killed Nelson Boughton. Krieger was physically abusing his wife, and one evening she ran from her house with her children to escape this abuse and was protected by Nelson Boughton. Mr. Kriegler arrived at the Boughton home with a knife in his hand and stabbed Mr. Boughton in the back, the protector of that woman and her children, and the knife went straight through into his heart, and he died instantly. Krigler was subsequently arrested and moved to a jail in Faribault for his own personal safety, because there was fears that there'd be some retribution, application of some quick justice for Mr. Krigler, but also so he could have a fair trial. So he was moved to a jail in Faribault, and he was tried. The legal proceedings were in Owatonna in Steele County. The trial lasted about 30 days and was reported to be one of the more expensive trials to be held in that county at the time. Again, we're talking 1860 or so. Krigler was found guilty and scheduled for execution by hanging in Albert Lea on March 1861. So when that hanging was scheduled, several thousand people attended the hanging. It was conducted east of Broadway Avenue, which is the main thoroughfare that cuts through the heart of downtown Albert Lea, and the hanging was done in a low-lying area where the present law enforcement center is at and the new police station. The gallows were erected there, and Krigler seemed to be oblivious to the fact that he was going to be hung. So a noose was put around his neck and a black bag was placed over his head, and the local reporters indicated that he bawled like a calf before the door or the hatch was released, and he fell to his death by hanging. The Minnesota Historical Company, which was today the Minnesota Historical Society, noted in an 1882 history of Freeborn County that Krigler's earthly career was thus ingloriously ended, and it was said that he was the only white man ever legally executed in Minnesota up to that point in time. So an interesting statement that Krigler was the only white man ever legally executed in Minnesota at this time of 1860. Another sad tale from Bancroft, which again is north of Albert Lea, current location of the Good Samaritan Center. But in Bancroft in 1866, Mrs. Charles Anderson went to the barn to milk her cows. Now this is in the middle of the winter. Not an unusual task that would be occurring in these ghost towns, because creameries were very common, and raising dairy cattle was a common practice for those folks involved in agriculture. So in 1866, she goes out to milk her cows in the middle of winter. Outside of her farmhouse was a raging blizzard, but the cows couldn't wait. Sad to say, Mrs. Anderson left her home. She immediately became disoriented, and she was found 2 miles from her home, frozen to death in the snow. Another sad tale is from the ghost town of Bath. Again, that's north central Freeborn County. A ghost town at one point had a population of over 900 people. And this is about love found and lost, and that occurred in many of these ghost towns. Love was lost and found and lost. And that's true of Dane Christian Rasmussen. He lost his true love, and with the loss, Mr. Rasmussen did not recover. He decided to end his life. So he went on to ensure his eternal demise. He devised a plan to make certain that he would pass. Really committed double jeopardy. He threw a noose over the limb of a sturdy oak tree near Bath and climbed to the top. In his coat pocket was a sharp knife, and as he prepared to take his final leap, he slashed his throat with the knife and then jumped, and he was found dead at the scene. And then finally, another strange tale from the ghost towns of Freeborn County is the village of St. Nicholas. Again, St. Nicholas was in the running to be the county seat, almost a guarantee of your survival as a community. George Rubel from Albert Lea approached the founders of St. Nicholas and said, let's merge our communities and make a large, thriving metropolis that was focused on a productive and profitable potential sawmill. And they turned down that Albert Lea founder, and the town passed. It didn't win the election to be the county seat, and immediately some of the town was simply disassembled and moved to Alexandria. Well, after that move occurred, people were scavenging around the remnants of St. Nicholas. There's not much there. You can see where a granary existed, and you can see the remnants of a stagecoach trail. But they found counterfeiting equipment. There were dyes, crucible, and metal. And the object of that counterfeiting enterprise in St. Nicholas was to produce counterfeit 50-cent pieces. Now, again, remember, St. Nicholas is founded in 1855, and during that period, paper currency isn't very popular. It starts to gain some popularity in 1861. Silver certificates were common 1878. But if you're going to counterfeit, coinage is the way to go. And we have the remnants of a counterfeit 50-cent piece operation in the ghost town of St. Nicholas. They also did find an underground passage that was probably underneath the general store there in St. Nicholas, and that underground tunnel and passage went right to the lake. I don't know if it was meant to be a way to ship counterfeit coins out of that community or to make a quick escape, but they found a couple interesting things in the remnants of St. Nicholas: counterfeiting equipment and a secret underground passage to Albert Lea Lake. That concludes episode 6, our final episode in the ghost towns of Freeborn County. Again, this is Gary Schindler. I'm a local historian and board member for the Freeborn County Historical Museum and Village. I appreciate you listening to the podcast. Tell your friends. Hopefully you learned a little bit about the founding of Freeborn County.
This collaboration is made possible by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund through the vote of Minnesotans on November 4th, 2008, administered by the Minnesota Historical Society.